For one of the most ubiquitous movies in cinema history, I think The Wizard of Oz is still rather underrated when it comes to its themes of inner virtues and self-worth. Its status as a family film means that even being regarded as one of the best films ever made by many doesn't stop it from being unfairly judged as simplistic or just for kids by many others. But Oz, alongside Beauty and the Beast, is one of the best cases for why something being accessible to the whole family is not synonymous with being unsophisticated. The "it was within you all along" character journeys for Dorothy's companions is a good, straightforward message that is perfect for kids, but it's the framing through the fantastical environment of Oz and its characters that makes this a rich subject for scrutiny well past childhood. It's mostly owed to the way the trio conflate physical and material possessions with quality of character. Sure, the wizard's gifts are played for laughs, but they serve a vital purpose of hammering home the point that Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Lion only ever lacked faith in themselves, and that they were never fully responsible for that deficiency either. The ones to blame are those who brought them into the world and those who run and shape the world, who impressed upon them false standards of fulfillment that only serve to make them feel insufficient. For Scarecrow and Tin Man, this boils down to their physical appearance lacking what others consider to be vital parts that anyone should have to be considered a real person, while the lion, meeting all the ideal physical standards, feels the pressure of expectation to live up to the standards the world associates with them. With all this going on with our heroes, it's understandable that both the book and the film choose to take a comparatively straightforward approach to the idea of good and evil, presenting them as factions and magical practices that the witches and creatures of Oz can quantify. So it's not surprising that this is the detail that people want to see further developed, including author Gregory Maguire, whose 1995 novel Wicked: The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West puts the evil witch of Wizard of Oz center stage to question the nature of evil, brought to Broadway in 2003 and now back to cinema this year and next year. Yeah, they didn't actually promote the whole two-parter thing too much, so if you didn't know, surprise, this is basically the first act of the musical made into a full feature. And not just because it's been a small eternity since I saw the musical, it makes for an interesting analysis to see how Wicked the Movie Part 1 functions by itself as a fleshing out of the witch's wickedness. I've heard it said of the book that this becomes a matter of nature versus nurture. Whether that's true of the book, I don't know, but I don't think it's true of its adaptations. That being said, I've always been a little unclear if when people say the theme of something is nature versus nurture, the story is meant to feature the theme as an ongoing mystery in which we weigh the proof for one or the other against each other. In Wicked Part 1, Elphaba's nature is empathetic, strong-willed, and she has a fully formed sense of fairness and justice. So on the nurture end, it isn't just that she is treated unfairly, she recognizes that she is. She's not Quasimodo, believing herself to be the abomination her family and other children treat her as, until a positive figure arrives in her life to make her question all she saw herself as. Because the real source of nurturing comes from the animal servants who do treat her with kindness and inform her that the way she's treated by others is wrong. So yeah, unless I'm missing something about the actual appeal of nature or nurture narratives, I don't think this is one, particularly in respect to the concept of evil. Both of these usually adverse attributes, in this case, contribute to making Elphaba a recognizably, unproblematically good person by most modern moral standards. Wicked is more about how the idea of evil is just that, an idea, an invention, a tool of social leverage. This is most prominent and relevant in the ways that those in power recognize that the best way to have their image of good and benevolent go unchallenged is by presenting the populace with a common enemy. In this case, sentient animals, once common members of society, are quickly being silenced and caged by the humans they once lived alongside in prosperity. This leads to the wizard not really being that much of a revision from the Wizard of Oz version. The book, at least. Not so much the kindly man from the 1939 film that we're supposed to associate with the very good-natured Professor Marvel. As in Wicked, he is very much the huckster trying to make the best of his newfound position of power. This represents a missed opportunity, I think, to have this narrative's interrogation of evil line up with and further develop the aforementioned themes found in the 1939 film. The Wizard of Wicked mentions that what he is doing in Oz is based on practices he observed back home. In other words, he is consciously choosing to exploit and subjugate others for his gain, all in the aid of fixing what he describes as a world in turmoil. What I was waiting for him to say was that the practices he observed back home was the caging of animals, which, given his association with travelling performers, would probably be something he's familiar with. If the wizard was meant to be a revision of the Professor Marvel version, this would be an opportunity to present the evil he inflicts as a byproduct of his sense of good, or at least his sense of right, of proper. The wizard arrived in a world he saw as in turmoil and instinctively saw the problem as the thing that deviates from what he considers to be natural, free-roaming, thinking and speaking animals. And in assuming leadership of Oz and winning the admiration of his subjects, he creates a fixed image of what a good and complete person looks like. And this aspirational image ostracizes anyone who doesn't fit the mold. The blame is not on the image for neglecting all the people and creatures who don't fit it. It is those people's fault for not resembling the image in the first place. It makes for a clearer revision of the wizard's character, where he was bumbling and lacking in any real power, but always shown to be morally upstanding. Here he is bumbling and lacking any power and well-meaning, but his own moral sensibilities are fallible as anybody else's and therefore can be dangerous. And from this I think you have a more complete picture of how the very concept of good breeds evil, both in the way that it accuses people of being evil simply for not fitting this limited description of what qualifies as good, and therefore rots the minds of the people who actually believe they fit this mold. As it is, good and bad behavior is interpreted by all the characters in Wicked Part 1 as purely transactional, all the way down to the central Glinda-Elphaba hate-to-love relationship. The first moment of connection between these two that is meant to communicate some level of deeper understanding is kickstarted by Elphaba brokering a deal to get Glinda something she desperately wants. This alone triggers regret in Glinda for her latest plan to mock Elphaba. There's something of an irony to be felt as well in the fact that what Elphaba secures for Glinda is a place next to her in a sorcery class. The usual purpose of magic in a fantasy world is to be more emotion-based, just as Elphaba's magical abilities are shown to be, and therefore a strengthening of bonds of friendship will be shown to connect more with magical elements of a world than the more mundane elements, and yet here magic is reduced to a trade, an exchange of goods and services. It gives the start to their friendship a somewhat bitter taste, but also a further insight into how warped the perception of goodness and badness, likable and unlikable, is in this world. It makes the conclusion of this film, also known as the first act break in the stage musical, the first display of deeper connection the duo get, and the greatest moment of character advancement for both of them, as the two of them have to reckon with parting with one another. In Elphaba's case, she has grown up thinking about other people, but always in a way that resembles servitude, as the help she lends others is seldom reciprocated, and at this point of no return, she must assert her desire to help others through her own abilities and power. In some cases, thinking about others and about yourself are not warring counterpoints. In Glinda's case, her sense of goodness and charity is something that needs to be seen to be valid, and it comes with an expectation of praise and gratitude. Even as friendship blossoms between her and Elphaba, she needs to be by her side, either in support or the hopes of her own elevation. Again, I have no memory of whether this is how it feels in the musical, but the decision here to not go with Elphaba feels like the first real moment she is fully thinking about how what her friend is doing is best for her. By which I mean best for Elphaba, not for Glinda, and Glinda is not thinking about how it applies to her whatsoever. It is very effectively bittersweet, and stands as a single instance of contrast with the rest of the film's perspective. It makes me very interested to see what Part 2 will offer. Incidentally, I'm also hopeful that for Part 2 we may get a type of lighting other than sunlight you have to squint through in order to see anything.